The sound came first, a low groan, like the apartment was sighing after holding its breath for too long. Sienna Carter was brushing her teeth, half listening to an old true crime podcast playing from her phone, when the ceiling above her began to crack. She looked up, foamy toothpaste still in her mouth, just in time to see a hairline fracture split like a spider web across the plaster. Then came the crash. A deafening explosion of drywall, pipes, and dust collapsed in a heap over her bathtub. Chunks of ceiling slammed into porcelain, water gushed from somewhere overhead, and the air was filled with the sharp smell of plaster and metal. Sienna screamed. By the time she stumbled out into the hallway, coughing and soaked, the upstairs neighbor was already banging on her door. The whole building was shaking. Sienna stood in the hallway in just a towel, staring back at the mess, heart racing. The bathroom ceiling had completely caved in. Not partially, not a crack or a leak. Gone. Wrecked. 3 hours later, she was in a daze, sitting on the back of an ambulance with a warm blanket around her shoulders, mascara smudged from tears and dust. A city inspector muttered something about old pipes, substandard renovations, and at least the walls didn't go too. The only thing Sienna could mutter back was, my laptop was in there. Her landlord, naturally, was unreachable. I can't stay here, she murmured into the phone, holding it between her shoulder and ear as she stuffed a bag with whatever dry clothes she could find in the rubble of her room. It's unlivable. They said they have to tear the bathroom out and redo the plumbing. I don't even know when I'll be back. Ethan sighed on the other end of the line. Then come here. Sienna hesitated. Your place? My place, he repeated. You're my sister. You're not going to a hotel or couch surfing. You're moving in with me until they fix it. There was a long silence. She could already hear him anticipating her next argument. Are you sure your roommate's okay with that? Jackson? Yeah, he's chill. He's hardly ever home anyway. She remembered the last time Ethan had moved, briefly mentioning that he was living with someone now, a friend from work. She hadn't paid much attention at the time. Okay, she finally said, her voice small. Thanks, Ethan. Of course. I'll come get you. Ethan's apartment was masculine, clean, minimalistic, and all sharp angles, grays, blacks, and chrome. The kind of space that looked like it belonged in a Bachelor lifestyle magazine. It was almost comical how opposite it was from her now destroyed apartment, which had been full of secondhand throw pillows, overgrown plants, and soft jazz humming from the speakers. This is your room, Ethan said, pushing open the door to a guest bedroom that looked barely touched. Fresh sheets, closets empty. Sienna stepped inside, placing her bag down. It's nice. You okay? She forced a smile. Yeah, just emotionally concussed. He laughed. Well, lucky for you, we've got wine and leftover pizza. She nodded, then glanced toward the open living room where a dark leather couch sat facing a massive TV. He's not home yet? She asked lightly. Jackson? Nah, probably working late. You'll like him. He's cool. She met him the next morning. Still in a fog of exhaustion and bad dreams about collapsing ceilings, Sienna padded into the kitchen in an oversized hoodie and leggings, her hair tied in a loose bun. She was pouring coffee when she heard the front door unlock. Then he walked in. Matt's sister, I presume? Sienna turned, and her mug nearly slipped from her hands. Jackson Reed was tall, ridiculously tall, with messy dark hair that looked like it had just been run through a motorcycle helmet, broad shoulders that barely fit through the doorway, and tattoos that snaked up his arms and peeked from the neckline of his black t-shirt. But it was his hands that caught her attention. An intricate clock was tattooed on the back of one hand, and on his fingers, bones. Realistic, white ink bones traced along each digit like he'd reached into a skeleton's grasp and kept it for himself. She stared. He smirked. You good? She shook herself out of it. Yeah, sorry. Just didn't expect you to be, a walking art gallery? No, she said quickly. Hot. Oh God, did she say that out loud? His eyebrows rose and his smirk turned devilish. Well, Thanks for the honesty. Sienna nearly dropped dead from embarrassment. I'm Sienna, she muttered, turning back to the coffee machine. Ah, Jackson. She felt his eyes on her as he passed by, grabbing a protein bar from the counter. He didn't say anything else, just nodded once and disappeared into his bedroom. She let out a slow breath. This was going to be dangerous. Later that evening, Sienna found herself curled up on the couch watching an old film, trying to focus, but her eyes kept flicking to the hallway. Jackson was somewhere back there, behind his closed door. She wondered what he did for work, why he came home so late, what that tattoo of the clock meant, and most of all, why her heart had started pounding the second he walked into the room. Her phone buzzed. Ethan. I'm crashing at Hannah's tonight. You good? Sienna. Yep, just me and your very attractive roommate. She stared at that text for too long before hitting delete and replacing it with, Sienna. Yep, just watching a movie. Somewhere deep inside her, a voice whispered, what Ethan doesn't know won't hurt him. But as the movie flickered across her face and the door to Jackson's room opened again, Sienna wasn't sure how long she could keep pretending that the danger wasn't thrilling, or that temptation wasn't already winning. Sienna had always considered herself good at boundaries. She was the kind of woman who sent polite texts, used coasters without being told, and always asked before borrowing someone's charger. But boundaries meant nothing when the man who was testing them looked like Jackson Reed. Especially when he walked around shirtless every morning. Do you ever wear clothes? She muttered under her breath, watching him pour coffee at the kitchen island. Not if I can help it, he replied casually, not even turning around. Hot shower, hot kitchen. Why waste the energy? Sienna bit the inside of her cheek, trying to focus on the oatmeal she was stirring. Her eyes betrayed her, flickering toward the bold script tattoo just above the waistband of his sweatpants. It read, Don't wait for tomorrow in a clean, curved ink. She wasn't sure if it was meant to be motivational or seductive, but either way, it was working. You're lucky I have willpower, she muttered, half to herself. He turned, finally meeting her eyes. Are you, though? She dropped the spoon into her oatmeal and walked away. The first week flew by. Sienna worked from her laptop most days, sitting cross-legged on the edge of the couch or tucked into the guest bedroom. Ethan, true to form, was in and out, between his girlfriend Hannah's place and long shifts at the office. Jackson, however, was harder to ignore. He was always there when she wasn't expecting him, leaning against the fridge with a smoothie in hand, tossing a basketball up with one hand while scrolling through his phone with the other, listening to music at 2 a.m. when she came out for water, shirtless again, always shirtless. Headphones on, eyes closed, moving like the music was part of him. She told herself it wasn't a big deal. She was just living with her brother's roommate. Nothing would happen, except something already was. It was Saturday afternoon when Ethan finally sat her down. They were on the balcony, Ethan with a beer, Sienna with a half-empty mug of chai she didn't really want. The city buzzed below, humid and restless. So, Ethan started slowly, how's the place treating you? It's clean, quiet, too many leather surfaces. He laughed. That's Jackson's influence. He thinks he's a Bond villain or something. Sienna smirked but didn't comment. Her brother narrowed his eyes slightly. Speaking of Jackson, she stiffened just a little. I know well, look, I just want to say this up front. He's not a bad guy, but he's not relationship material. At least not for you. Sienna blinked. Why would you say that? Because I've known him for 6 years. He's my friend, yes, but he's also complicated. He doesn't do feelings. He's dated people, but it never lasts. He doesn't commit. And I don't want you to get hurt. Ethan, I mean it, Sienna. His voice was suddenly serious. I trust you, but I don't want this to turn into something that ruins our friendship or makes things awkward when you move out. She looked away, swallowing the heat rising in her chest. Not anger exactly. Not shame either. Something in between. I'm not stupid, she said softly. I didn't say you were. I'm just saying he's off limits. That night she couldn't sleep. It wasn't Ethan's warning that kept her awake. It was the conversations she didn't have, the feelings she refused to admit, the way Jackson had looked at her earlier when she dropped a spoon and bent down to pick it up. He hadn't said anything, but his gaze had lingered, slow, focused. She had felt it, all the way down. The guest room felt smaller that night, claustrophobic, and when she padded out into the hallway to get water, the soft glow of the living room caught her eye. He was there, on the couch, legs stretched out, reading a book. A real book, not a phone, not a tablet. Sienna leaned against the wall and studied him quietly. "I thought you didn't do feelings," she said suddenly. He looked up, a slight grin tugging at his lips. "Who said that?" "My brother." He chuckled and sat up straighter, tossing the book on the coffee table. "Well, he's not wrong, but he's not entirely right either." She crossed the room and sat at the opposite end of the couch. The room was quiet, lit only by the dim floor lamp behind him. Shadows danced across his tattoos. "So what do you do?" she asked, voice soft. "If not feelings." He didn't answer right away. "I do moments," he said at last. "Good ones, real ones, but no expectations, no false promises." She tilted her head. "And if the moments become something more?" He leaned in, eyes dark and slow. "Then I deal with it, but I don't chase it." Sienna nodded, looking down at her hands. "That sounds lonely." "It can be," he paused, "but it's also honest." There was a silence between them, tense and electric. Then he asked, "What about you?" "I used to be all in, on everything. But now?" She shook her head. "I'm just trying not to fall for the wrong person." Their eyes met. Dangerous territory. She stood up before anything else could be said. "Good night, Jackson." "Night, Sienna." She dreamt of him that night. Not explicitly, but close. Hands grazing skin. Breaths shared. A whisper of his tattooed fingers trailing down her arm. It was maddening. She woke up flushed, heart pounding, annoyed with herself. It didn't help that when she opened her bedroom door, he was already in the kitchen, shirtless again, cracking eggs into a pan, humming something low and gravelly. "Want some?" he asked, glancing over his shoulder. Sienna sighed. "Sure, but only if you put on a shirt." He laughed, and the sound felt like warm syrup in her chest. Later that day, she FaceTimed her best friend Delilah, who took one look at her flushed cheeks and said, "Girl, what did you do?" "Nothing," Sienna replied quickly. "Yet." "Oh God, who is he?" "Ethan's roommate." Delilah's mouth dropped open. "You're playing with fire." "I know." Delilah leaned closer to the screen. "You do realize that rule number 1 of roommate etiquette is don't fall for the hot one. Technically, I'm the guest, not the roommate. Don't play smart. You're in too deep." Sienna didn't argue, because it was true. She was in too deep already. The rain came heavy that evening. Thick droplets pounded against the windows, painting blurred streaks across the glass as thunder rumbled far in the distance. Sienna sat by the window, knees tucked to her chest, wrapped in a gray throw blanket as she watched the storm dance over the skyline. Behind her, the apartment was quiet. Ethan had gone out to dinner with Hannah, and Jackson, strangely, hadn't emerged from his room since morning. Her chest felt tight, not just because of the weather, but because she kept replaying their last conversation over and over in her mind. The way his voice dropped when he said he only did moments. The way he looked at her like he was challenging her to prove him wrong. But the worst part? She wanted to. She wanted to challenge him, to mean something more. It was just after 8 o'clock when his door finally creaked open. Sienna didn't turn. She listened to his footsteps cross the living room, the soft sound of a fridge opening, the fizz of soda cracking. Then silence. Then a soft, "You okay?" She turned slowly, eyes meeting his. He was in a black long-sleeved tee and dark jeans, his hair still damp from a shower. Somehow even his casual looked calculated, effortless. "Storms just got me feeling weird," she said. He nodded and leaned against the wall, sipping his drink. Happens to me too. You're quiet today. He shrugged, eyes cast to the floor for a second. Some days just come with memories I'd rather leave alone. Sienna blinked. Today specifically? Yeah. She hesitated. Can I ask what happened? Jackson didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice was low, rough. My sister died 3 years ago today. Her heart sank. I'm so sorry, Jackson. He nodded once, eyes not meeting hers. Car accident, hit and run. She was 24. I didn't know, Sienna whispered. No reason you would. Silence stretched between them. Not heavy, just real, honest. She was the only family I had left, he added. After that, it was hard to be around people who always wanted things from me. Emotions, promises. I didn't have any to give. Sienna stepped closer. Her hand brushed his arm gently. You don't have to explain yourself to me. His eyes finally met hers. But I want to. And in that single sentence, the walls between them cracked just a little. The storm didn't let up. Neither did the pull between them. They ended up watching an old film on the couch, an indie drama Jackson loved but refused to explain. You'll see, he said. It's better felt than told. Halfway through, her head ended up on his shoulder. He didn't move. By the time the credits rolled, the tension between them was thick, buzzing beneath her skin like static. She looked up. He looked down. Their faces were inches apart. I should go to bed, she whispered, barely breathing. You should, he agreed. Neither of them moved. Then finally she stood. Good night, Jackson. He didn't say a word. But as she walked away, she could feel his gaze burning into her back. The next morning, Ethan came home earlier than expected. Sienna had just stepped out of the bathroom when she nearly ran into him in the hallway. Geez, she laughed. You scared me. Sorry, he said. Didn't know you were up. They stood awkwardly for a second. Then Ethan asked, You and Jackson getting along okay? Sienna nodded too fast. Yeah, totally. Why? He gave her a long look. No reason, just making sure. She brushed past him, heading to the kitchen before he could see the flush in her cheeks. But her brother wasn't stupid. And something in his eyes told her he was watching now. Later that day, she found herself alone with Jackson again. He was sketching on a tablet at the kitchen island, brows furrowed, earbuds in. She peered over his shoulder. You draw? He looked up, one brow raised. Architect by degree, illustrator by heart. You never told me that. You never asked. She smiled. Can I see? He angled the screen toward her. The digital sketch was stunning. A sprawling cityscape, midnight tones layered over stark white highlights. On one of the rooftops stood a girl in a hoodie, gazing at the skyline. That's beautiful, she said softly. It's you. Her breath caught. What? Jackson looked up, eyes steady. That night you were watching the storm, you looked like you were in a different world. So I drew it. Sienna couldn't speak. No one had ever drawn her before. Not like this. Not from memory. Why? She whispered. He shrugged. Because some moments deserve to be remembered. Later that evening, Ethan pulled her aside again. Sienna. She looked up from her phone. Yeah? I need to know something. She stilled. He sighed. Is there something going on between you and Jackson? Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Because I see how he looks at you, Ethan added, and I've seen you blush more times in the last week than in the last 10 years. Sienna stared down at her hands. I don't want to lie to you, she said finally, but I also don't know what it is yet. Ethan exhaled slowly. Just be careful, okay? I will. But as she said it, part of her already knew. It was too late. That night, as the rain returned, Jackson knocked on her bedroom door. She opened it slowly. Hey, can we talk? He asked. Sienna nodded and stepped aside. He walked in, eyes soft, hair still messy from the wind. I just need to say this, he said, before this becomes something we can't control. Her heart was pounding. I know I told you I don't do feelings, but I think I'm starting to. She swallowed. I can't promise I won't screw up, he said. But I haven't stopped thinking about you since the night you moved in. Sienna stared at him, then stepped forward and kissed him. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't wild. It was slow, intentional, electric. When they finally pulled apart, she whispered, I've been thinking about you too. Sienna's hands were still trembling when she closed the bedroom door behind him. The kiss had changed everything. What began as tension and lingering glances had become something undeniable. It felt reckless, forbidden, beautiful. And now, it was real. The silence that followed was louder than any argument could have been. She stood there for a while, forehead resting against the door, her lips still tingling from the feel of his. The heat of his body, the gravity of his confession, the way he looked at her like she was both a challenge and a home. She couldn't shake it. Neither could he. Jackson lay awake in his room, staring at the ceiling, one arm tucked under his head, the other resting over his chest like it could slow his racing heart. She was off limits. That had always been the rule. 2 years ago, Jackson and Ethan had stood on the rooftop of their old apartment, beer bottles clinking in the heat of a Lagos evening, laughing over old college stories and relationship screw-ups. Then Ethan's voice had turned serious. She scares me, man. Who? Jackson asked. Sienna. Jackson's shoulders tensed. Ethan sighed. She was dating this guy last year. I thought he was harmless. Then I found out he had 2 other girls and a police record. She didn't even know. I had to beg her to dump him. Jackson said nothing, remembering how that had ended. Ethan furious, Sienna devastated, and the jerk in question politely threatened to leave the city or face Ethan's fists. I just hate seeing her hurt, Ethan continued. That girl's got the softest heart and the worst taste. Jackson had laughed to hide the fact that he knew exactly how soft her heart was. Promise me something, Ethan had said that night, clinking his bottle against Jackson's. If she ever ends up crashing with us, or if you two ever get close, don't go there. Go where? You know where, Jackson smirked. To your precious sister's heart? Exactly, Ethan had warned. No matter how fine she is, you're my boy, and my boys don't date my sister. Jackson had nodded, and he'd meant it. Until now. The next morning, the kitchen was too quiet. Jackson was already there, scrolling through his phone, pretending not to notice when Sienna entered. She went straight to the fridge, heart hammering, not sure how to act normal when everything between them had shifted overnight. Morning, he said finally, voice low. Hey. She poured juice into a glass and leaned against the counter. Their eyes met and lingered. Heat flickered between them like a match waiting to ignite. Footsteps. They both sprang apart like teenagers caught in the act. Ethan entered the room, tying the strings of his hoodie, eyes bouncing from Jackson to Sienna like a silent radar. Sienna busied herself with her juice. Jackson suddenly found his phone fascinating. Everything okay? Ethan asked slowly. Peachy, Sienna said too brightly. Ethan narrowed his eyes but didn't press further. I'll be back late. Hannah's dragging me to some engagement party. Have fun, Jackson replied. When the door closed behind him, they both exhaled like they'd been holding their breath for an hour. That was close, Sienna muttered. Jackson smirked. We're not good at this. No, we're really not. They tried to keep their distance after that. Emphasis on tried. She avoided sitting next to him on the couch. He stopped walking into the kitchen shirtless. She stopped brushing his arm when they passed each other. He stopped teasing her when she forgot her laptop charger for the 3rd time in a row. But some things couldn't be helped. One night, Sienna walked in on him, sketching again. What are you drawing now? She asked softly. He turned the tablet toward her, a close-up of eyes, hers, intense, curious, 1,000 questions inside them. Do you always make people into art? Only the ones I can't stop looking at. Her breath caught. Jackson, she whispered. He leaned in, lips brushing her ear. Say it. Sienna. He kissed her again. And the promise he'd made years ago was obliterated. The guilt came later. While lying in bed, staring at the ceiling like it could offer answers, he remembered the rooftop, the beer, the promise, the way Ethan's voice had cracked when he said, "She's all I've got left." Jackson shut his eyes and sighed. He hadn't gone looking for this. He hadn't planned to fall for her. But even before she moved in, he'd noticed her from a distance. When she visited, when she laughed with Ethan over brunch, when she wore those soft sweaters that made her look like a painting. He remembered one night clearly. A dinner party. Sienna had walked in late wearing this burnt orange dress, and Jackson had spilled his drink. He'd never told Ethan. But from that moment on, he'd known she was going to ruin him. Sienna wasn't faring any better. She tried to focus on work, on laundry, on anything else, but she could still feel his mouth on hers, still hear his laugh in her chest, and the way he had looked at her, like she wasn't a guest in his apartment, but a permanent part of it, was messing with her brain. Worse, she was starting to forget it was supposed to be temporary. When she picked up a grocery list and realized she had written his cereal instead of mine, she knew she was spiraling. And Ethan was noticing. "You've been jumpy lately," he commented casually one night. Sienna froze mid-step. "Jumpy?" "Yeah, and you and Jackson? You've been weird." She laughed nervously. "Weird how?" "I don't know. Just different." Sienna shrugged. "Maybe we're just getting used to each other." Ethan didn't look convinced. That weekend, the three of them ended up in the living room. Movie night. Ethan sat in the recliner. Sienna and Jackson took the couch, leaving a full cushion of space between them. But their pinkies brushed once in the dark, and it sent a spark so electric through Sienna's body, she nearly dropped her drink. Later, when Ethan dozed off during the credits, Jackson leaned in and whispered, "We need to be more careful." Sienna nodded. But they both knew it was already too late. Rain tapped gently on the window panes, casting moving shadows across the apartment walls. It was a quiet kind of evening, the kind that echoed the silence between two people holding onto a secret too big to name. Sienna sat on the couch with her laptop open, pretending to work, while Jackson stood by the kitchen window, nursing a glass of scotch, shirt sleeves rolled up, forearms inked with the stories he never told. She watched him from behind the screen, pretending not to notice how tense he looked, how far away his eyes were. She didn't know what was pulling him into silence tonight, but Ethan did. Ethan always knew. 3 years ago, Jackson Reed's last name meant something. Reed Holdings, a multinational empire built on oil, construction, and land development. The kind of family legacy made up of luxury towers, headlines, and dinner parties in homes with too many rooms. He was the heir, the golden boy. But golden boys sometimes burn too bright and too fast. Jackson had been brilliant in university, top of his class in architecture and business strategy, sharp mind, easy charm. But he was also reckless, unchecked, cared more about winning arguments than weighing consequences. And when he returned to the company full-time after his degree, he wanted to prove himself. Not as his father's shadow, but as the one who could push things forward. He made a deal. Big, ambitious, flashy. A new tech construction merger in Kenya that would have made Reed Holdings a pioneer in smart cities. But the partner he shook hands with had hidden debts and international lawsuits buried under a fake shell company. And Jackson didn't do his due diligence. He rushed. He signed. 2 months later, the company lost millions. And his father, Michael Reed, the empire's stone-faced founder, stood at the edge of Jackson's desk and uttered 3 words that changed everything. "Get out now." He wasn't disowned, not formally, but the message was clear. No more seat at the boardroom, no more driver, no more penthouse, just silence. So he left, took 1 bag, 1 sketch pad, 1 broken future, and called the only person he trusted. "Bro, are you serious?" Ethan had said when he showed up at the apartment with nothing but a backpack and a 5-day shadow. Jackson had nodded once. I need to disappear. Ethan had stepped aside. Then disappear here. Only Ethan knew the truth. Not even Sienna. Not his family's PR team. Not the press. Jackson Reed, heir to a billion-dollar fortune, had become just Jackson. Tattooed illustrator. Laid-back roommate. Coffee snob. Now, as Jackson stood by the window, his thoughts weren't on the rain, but on her, Sienna. The way she looked at him lately, curious, kind, cautious. The way her presence had become a steady hum in his otherwise quiet life. The way her laugh made the apartment feel like something close to a home again. She had no idea who he used to be, and he didn't know how to tell her. Because the truth felt too heavy, too ugly, too disappointing. And he'd already spent 3 years punishing himself for it. Sienna stood and walked toward him. You okay? He turned, masking the storm behind his eyes. Yeah, just tired. Want to talk about it? He considered lying. But then he looked at her, the way her brows creased in concern, the warmth in her voice. She wasn't just interested, she cared. I used to have a different life, he said quietly. Sienna blinked. What kind of life? The kind with drivers, board meetings, headlines. He swallowed. I'm Michael Reed's son. She froze. Reed. As in Reed Holdings? He nodded slowly. I don't understand, she whispered. What happened? I messed up, he said, voice tight. One bad deal, one wrong partner. It blew up. Millions lost. My dad kicked me out of the company. Told me I wasn't ready to lead anything. She sat down beside him, stunned. You've never mentioned it. I don't talk about it. Does Ethan know? He's the only one who does. Your family? We haven't spoken in almost 3 years. The silence was thick, humming with questions. You been carrying that alone? She asked softly. Jackson didn't respond. He didn't need to. She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. You're not a failure, she said. His throat worked hard. I feel like one. You're not. I let my dad down, my whole team, myself. You were young, ambitious. You made a mistake. $1 billion one. Sienna gripped his hand tighter. You're not your worst decision. His eyes found hers. Then who am I? She smiled gently. The man who saved me from my disaster, who draws people like he sees their souls, who listens without interrupting, who makes bad coffee and great pasta. He laughed softly. And maybe, she added, heart thudding, the man I'm starting to fall for. The silence after that was different, tender, powerful, real. He leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers. I can't give you the life I was born into, he whispered, but I'd give you everything I have now. She closed her eyes. That's more than enough. Later that night, Ethan returned home and found them sitting at opposite ends of the couch again. But something was different. The air was still. Too still. Jackson stood to grab a glass of water, brushing past Ethan. Hey, Ethan said suddenly. Jackson paused. You okay? Jackson nodded. Yeah, just thinking. Ethan stared after him a long moment. He didn't know what had changed, but he could feel something cracking under the surface. And when secrets cracked, truths came flooding through. Ethan wasn't paranoid. He was observant. And over the past 2 weeks, he'd observed a lot. The long glances between Sienna and Jackson that lingered just a moment too long. The way she paused slightly when Jackson entered a room, like her body was tuning to his frequency. The way Jackson, usually laid back, sarcastic, and aloof, had started staying in on Friday nights, watching movies he never cared for. Sitting beside her with a silence that buzzed. They were trying to hide something. They just weren't doing it very well. It was a Sunday afternoon when Ethan caught Jackson alone in the kitchen, sipping from a water bottle, shirtless and still damp from a run. Ethan leaned against the doorway, arms folded. You and my sister, you've been spending a lot of time together. Jackson's hand froze mid-sip. He lowered the bottle slowly. She's here. I live here. Time's kind of unavoidable. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Don't be cute. Jackson sighed, turning to face him. Ethan? No. Let me say this before you try to joke your way out of it. Jackson straightened. You remember what we said years ago? Ethan asked. Jackson didn't answer. Rooftop, you, me, beer. I was talking about how worried I was about her dating that loser who lied about being an investment banker. Remember? Jackson's shoulders were tight now. You looked me dead in the eye and said, I'd never go there. You have my word. I remember, Jackson said finally, voice low. So what changed? Jackson hesitated. Then, she moved in. Ethan's jaw tensed. And I realized I was already halfway in trouble before she unpacked her suitcase. That night, Sienna was curled up in bed reading when Jackson knocked softly on her door. She opened it with a soft smile. Hey. He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him like the air outside was too heavy to breathe. He knows, Jackson said. Her smile dropped. Ethan? Jackson nodded. He didn't say it, but I could see it in his eyes. He's not stupid. Sienna sat on the edge of her bed, heart racing. What did he say? Reminded me of the promise. The one I made not to fall for you. Her breath caught. I broke it, Jackson added. Silence. I don't regret it, he said. She looked up slowly. I need you to know something, he continued. This isn't casual for me. Not anymore. I don't care what I said to Ethan 3 years ago. That promise came before I knew what it was like to see you brush your hair back when you're focused, or how your laugh sounds at 2 a.m., or what your hand feels like in mine. Sienna blinked away the sting in her eyes. He knelt in front of her. I don't want to sneak around. I don't want to hide you like a mistake. But I also don't want to destroy my friendship with your brother. I don't want to come between you two either, she whispered. He exhaled. Then what do we do? Her eyes searched his face. The man who had once been the son of a billionaire, now kneeling on an apartment bedroom floor, asking how to love her without losing everything else. We talked to him, she said softly. Together. Jackson nodded, but there was fear in his eyes. Not for himself. For her. Ethan found the envelope 2 days later. It was in the mail basket near the door. Thick, cream-colored, embossed with gold. His name was written in bold serif font. Mr. Ethan Carter. Formal invitation. Carter Tech Anniversary Gala. He almost tossed it. Almost. But the word Carter still meant something. Even after all these years, he opened it slowly. Inside was a glossy black and gold invitation to the Carter Tech 40th Anniversary Gala. A glittering affair in Victoria Island. Guest list full of Lagos elites, press, investors, names with power. He stood in silence, the invitation trembling in his hands. Then he walked straight to Jackson's room and tossed it onto his bed. Jackson stared at it. You going? Ethan asked. Jackson looked up. Are you? Ethan gave a half shrug. Might, just to remind them I'm still breathing. Jackson picked up the card, reading the fine print. Then he looked at Ethan. You should go, he said. You should too. Jackson scoffed. Right, show up like a ghost. Hi, remember me? The disappointment of the Reed family? Ethan crossed his arms. Maybe it's time you stop punishing yourself. Jackson didn't speak. Ethan added, You're not the only one who messed up their legacy. Their eyes met. And for the first time in 3 years, something like peace flickered between them. That night, Sienna sat with Jackson on the rooftop patio, a blanket draped over her shoulders, the Lagos skyline twinkling below like a million little secrets. Do you think he'll ever forgive us? She asked softly. I think he already knows the truth, Jackson replied. I think he's just waiting to see how we handle it. She rested her head on his shoulder. I don't want to keep hiding. Then let's not, he said. After the gala. She looked up at him. "I'll go," he said firmly. "I'll show my face. I'll stop running, and once that chapter is behind me." "You'll be ready for a new one?" she asked, hope blooming. "With you," he said. And that night on the rooftop, above all the noise and fear and secrets, they kissed. Not like a risk, not like a rebellion, but like a promise. The night of the gala arrived like a storm in silk. Carter Tech's 40th anniversary was everything the invite promised. Opulence draped in champagne and chandeliers. Guests floated across the ballroom in tailored suits and glittering gowns. Photographers flashed. Waiters moved like whispers between conversations laced with business and pretense. Jackson Reed adjusted his tie in the restroom mirror, the slick navy fabric of his tux sharp against his inked skin. He hadn't worn something this formal in years. He looked like the version of himself his father once approved of. Before the fall. But tonight, he wasn't here to impress anyone. He was here to confront the man who meant more to him than his own last name. Ethan. He found him near the bar, sipping whiskey, his frame stiff in a black tux. Ethan looked over, eyes narrowing slightly, like he'd been waiting. "Didn't think you'd show," Ethan said flatly. "Neither did I." They stood in silence for a beat, the tension between them a living, pulsing thing. "I need to say something," Jackson began. "No more half-truths. No more sneaking around." Ethan didn't blink. "Then say it. I'm in love with your sister." The words came out like a shot, clear, unflinching. Ethan's jaw tightened. "I tried not to be. God knows I tried," Jackson continued. "But she's the first real thing I've felt in a long time. And I'm not going to stand here like a coward and pretend it doesn't matter." "You made me a promise," Ethan said, voice low. "You promised me." "I know, and I broke it." Ethan took a slow step forward. "Do you know how many people I've let near her in the last 10 years? 2. And I made sure both were harmless." "I'm not harmless," Jackson said, "but I'm honest, and I would never hurt her." "That's not the point, Jackson," Ethan snapped. "The point is that you're my best friend, my brother in everything but blood. And you went behind my back. I didn't plan it, but you let it happen." Jackson didn't deny it. Ethan ran a hand over his face. "You should have come to me the moment it stopped being casual." "It was never casual." That stopped Ethan cold. "She moved in, and I tried to keep it friendly, respectful. But I saw her, really saw her. And the longer she stayed, the more I knew. I wasn't just falling. I was gone." Ethan's voice dropped. "So what are you asking me?" "Your blessing," Jackson said quietly, "and your forgiveness." Ethan's jaw flexed. His eyes dropped to the floor, then slowly returned to Jackson's. "You break her heart, Jackson. I won't just lose a friend. I'll lose you too." "I won't break her," Jackson said. "Not now. Not ever." Another pause. Then Ethan exhaled and gave a single nod. "Then you'd better not screw it up." An hour later, Jackson stood on the terrace, needing air. The ballroom was too loud, the walls too full of memory. He loosened his tie and stared out over the skyline, his reflection ghosting against the glass. "You always did prefer the edges of the room." Jackson turned slowly. His father stood there, Michael Reed, older now, more silver at the temples, same controlled presence, same calculating gaze. But tonight there was something different in his eyes. Something softer. "Didn't expect to see you here," Jackson said. "Didn't expect to see you either." Jackson turned back toward the skyline. "I didn't come to make a scene." "Good. You've done enough of those." Jackson laughed bitterly. "Right. The prodigal son shows his face and doesn't burn the building down. Gold star." Michael didn't reply. Jackson turned to face him fully. "You know what the worst part was?" he asked. "It wasn't the money, or the shame, or even getting kicked out." His voice cracked just slightly. "It was knowing that you loved that company more than you ever loved me." The words hung between them like smoke. Michael's face remained still, but his eyes betrayed something deeper. I didn't, he said finally. Could have fooled me. Michael exhaled. You made a mistake, a big one. But I was furious not because of the money, but because I knew you were better than that. And you threw it away to feel powerful, to prove a point. I was better, Jackson said bitterly. You just never saw it. I saw everything, Michael said quietly. You just didn't know I was still looking. Jackson blinked. Michael continued. I've been watching you, quietly. I know you took on freelance design work, that you've been mentoring underprivileged teens in Ikoyi, that you helped raise funds for that hospital wing downtown. Jackson's mouth parted slightly. You didn't vanish, Jackson. You rebuilt. And that's what makes you my son. Silence. Michael stepped closer. I never stopped being proud. I was just waiting for you to be proud of yourself again. For the first time in 3 years, Jackson couldn't speak. He swallowed hard, throat tight. Michael rested a firm hand on his shoulder. Come home when you're ready. Then he turned and walked away. Back inside, Sienna spotted Jackson returning through the ballroom doors. He looked different, like he'd just fought a war and won. She rushed to him. What happened? He cupped her face gently. I told Ethan the truth. Her eyes widened. And? He said if I hurt you, I lose him forever. She exhaled. Fair enough. Jackson smiled. I also talked to my father. She studied his face. He said he never stopped being proud, that he's been watching me, that I made myself better. Her hand slid into his. Because you have. He kissed her, slow and deep. Right there, in a room full of people who once knew who he was. None of them mattered, because she saw who he is now. And she had always been watching too. The apartment was quieter than usual. Not the normal, peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that pulsed with something unspoken. Sienna paced her room for the third time, pausing in front of the mirror. Her reflection looked pale, determined, nervous. Tonight she had to face Ethan, not as a sister dancing around secrets, but as a woman standing in her truth. She stepped out of her room, slowly padding down the hallway. Ethan was on the balcony, nursing a glass of red wine, city lights glittering behind him. He didn't turn when she opened the door. She took a deep breath. Can we talk? He didn't look at her, but his voice was soft. Figured this was coming. Sienna stepped beside him, her arms crossed protectively across her chest. I should have come to you sooner, she said. But I didn't want to risk making things weird. I didn't want to break anything between you and Jackson. Ethan gave a short laugh, no humor in it. Too late for that, huh? I love him, she said quietly. That made Ethan freeze. I didn't expect to. I tried not to, but I do. And I need you to know it's not a fling. It's not reckless. He's not the man he used to be. And I'm not the little sister who needs protecting anymore. Ethan finally turned. I know. Sienna blinked. You do? I saw it a long time ago, he said, voice thick. In the way he looked at you. Like he'd been holding his breath for years and finally exhaled. He sipped his wine, then added, You think I'm mad because of the promise. But that's not it. Then what? Ethan looked down at the city, jaw tight. I'm mad because you didn't tell me. Both of you. I've been living in this apartment with 2 people lying with their eyes. I was scared, she admitted, of hurting you, of disappointing you. I'm not disappointed, he said. I'm just lonely. That stopped her. Ethan gave a dry smile. Everyone thinks I've got it all together. But after I left Carter Tech, I never really forgave myself. I stayed away from Dad, from the press, from everything. Then you moved in. And for the first time in a long time, the apartment felt alive. He laughed bitterly. But it was never about me, was it? It was always about you two. I was just the guy standing in the middle. Sienna stepped forward and hugged him tightly. You're not in the middle, she said. You're part of this. Always. He held her back, fiercely. You sure he's the one? She smiled into his shoulder. Yeah, I'm sure. Ethan pulled away and wiped his face quickly, pretending it was just the wind. Then don't break his heart either. That man's made of steel and shame. He'll never survive it. A week later, Jackson stood in the center of his parents' estate living room, something between a fortress and a museum, holding Sienna's hand like it was the only thing anchoring him. She wore a sleek, emerald green dress and a nervous smile. The portraits of billionaires stared at her from the walls like judges. But she stood tall. Michael Reed, Jackson's father, extended a hand. Sienna, it's good to meet you officially. She shook it confidently. You too, Mr. Reed. Beside him, Jackson's mother, Madeline, offered a warmer smile. He told us you were special. Yeah, Jackson flushed. Mom, I meant it, she said, eyes sparkling. They sat in the formal dining room, silverware glinting, conversation gentle. Sienna spoke with grace, answering questions about her career, her family, how she met Jackson, skipping the bathroom ceiling collapse, of course. After dinner, while the parents cleared dessert plates, Jackson took her hand again. You okay? She nodded. They were lovely. I told you they're not all scary. No, just 80% terrifying, she teased. But your mom? I like her. Jackson smiled and tucked a curl behind her ear. Thank you for doing this. You didn't have to thank me. I do, he said, because bringing you here was a big step, and I was scared. Sienna looked into his eyes. Of them? No, of wanting this too much. Her heart cracked open all over again. Well, she said, leaning in, get used to it. That night they returned to the apartment, slipping in past midnight. Ethan was on the couch, half asleep. A movie paused on the screen. He looked up as they entered. Well? She survived, Jackson said. Barely, Sienna added. Ethan gave a sleepy grin. Glad you're back. Jackson looked at him. Thank you, he said. Ethan nodded. Don't make me regret it. I won't. Sienna rested her head on Jackson's shoulder as they sat beside Ethan, the three of them quiet. Not broken. Not hiding. Just finally together. Jackson had almost forgotten what her voice sounded like. It came back to him suddenly, like smoke curling under a door, soft, low, and edged in venomous sweetness. Hello, Jackson. He froze in the middle of the art exhibit lobby, phone still pressed to his ear. Sienna had just stepped away to take a work call. They were supposed to be enjoying a date night, private viewing, champagne, and laughter. But the woman now standing a few feet from him made the room feel colder, smaller. Her name was Celeste Ward, and once, a lifetime ago, she had been the woman standing beside him when his whole world burned. She was dressed in ivory, her sleek hair pulled back, a tablet in one hand and a glass of wine in the other. Still poised, still dangerous. It's been a while, she said. Jackson swallowed. Celeste. You look good, she added, her eyes trailing him in a way that made him feel like he was still 25, arrogant, and blind. I didn't know you were in Lagos. She smiled. I'm not. Not really. Just flew in to handle a little development summit. Reed Holdings invited me. Jackson's eyes darkened. My father invited you? Apparently, he still thinks I'm useful, she said, sipping her wine. I'm advising on a tech housing merger for one of your competitors. Of course she was. The last time he saw Celeste, she was standing in the aftermath of the Kenya deal disaster. The only one who had vouched for the partner that led to Jackson's downfall. The one who had whispered, trust me, while knowing exactly what she was doing. Why are you here? He asked flatly. She tilted her head. I heard a rumor that you're back, that you've got a pretty little girlfriend, and you're playing house with a second chance narrative. Leave her out of this. Celeste smirked. Touchy. I didn't peg you for the domestic type. I'm not the person you used to know. No, she challenged. Then prove it. And just like that, the offer was hanging between them. Come back. Play dirty. Take the shortcut. Jackson stepped closer, lowering his voice. You were the reason I lost everything. You lied to me. You pushed me into that deal because it benefited you, and I was too blind to see it. Her eyes flickered. I've worked 3 years to get here, to be the kind of man I should have been back then. And if you think I'm going to burn that down for a taste of the past, you don't know me at all. Celeste leaned back slightly, genuinely surprised. You've changed. I have, Jackson said, and you're not welcome in this new life. Sienna returned at that moment, laughing softly into her phone as she approached. Celeste's eyes followed her like a predator sizing up prey. She's pretty, she said under her breath. Walk away, Celeste, Jackson warned. The woman smiled, turned on her heel, and disappeared into the crowd. Sienna stepped up beside him, sensing the tension instantly. Who was that? No one, he said, slipping an arm around her waist. Just a ghost. But Sienna knew better. That night, Jackson told her everything. They sat on the edge of their bed, a single lamp glowing behind them. His hands were restless, but his voice was steady. She was the one who introduced me to that partner in the Kenya deal. Said she'd vetted him. Said it was a game changer. And you believed her? Sienna asked gently. I did. We were close. I didn't want to think she had an angle. Sienna nodded, silent for a long time. Then, do you still? Jackson met her eyes. Not even for a second. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. Thank you for telling me. I almost didn't, he confessed. I didn't want to bring the past into what we're building. But it's part of you, she said softly. And you chose to tell me. That matters. He exhaled, relief washing over him. Besides, she added, a smile playing on her lips, you handled her better than I would have. Oh? I would have spilled wine on her. He laughed, the sound cracking the last bit of tension in the room. 2 days later, Celeste tried again, this time via email. Subject, one more offer. You can still have it all. Prestige, power. The board is open to reevaluating. Think about it. CW. Jackson didn't reply. He forwarded it to his father with a short message. She's still playing games. I'm out. 10 minutes later, Michael Reed called him. Proud of you, son, his voice said simply, and Jackson realized he finally meant it. That evening, as Jackson and Sienna sat curled up on the living room couch, watching a documentary with Ethan sprawled across the recliner, a calm settled between them. The air no longer crackled with secrecy or guilt. It was honest. He reached for her hand and gave it a squeeze. No more running. No more past. Just the future. Messy, real, and entirely theirs. The sun was sinking behind the Lagos skyline, bleeding gold into the glass windows of their apartment. Jackson stood barefoot in the kitchen, stirring pasta absent-mindedly, watching the sky shift through warm hues like a slow exhale. Sienna was curled on the couch in one of his oversized shirts, reading a paperback, one leg tucked under the other. Her hair was messy from the breeze, her face lit by the orange glow of early evening. It hit him like a wave. He wanted this. Not for now. Not just because it was peaceful or exciting or healing, but because she was his calm after the storm, his second chance not just at love, but at life. Dinner's almost ready, he called. She looked up and smiled. Smells like the one you made that night I cried over my portfolio. I try to repeat my greatest hits. She stood and walked toward him, placing her hands on the counter across from him. You've been quiet today. He wiped his hands and stepped around to her side, suddenly close enough that her breath caught. I've been thinking, he said, voice low, about everything. Okay. About who I was, what I lost, and how I used to think redemption came in headlines and numbers. And now? She asked softly. Now I know it comes in mornings like this. In a cup of burnt coffee and a fight over who left the lights on. In you. Her eyes welled instantly. I used to believe I had to prove I was worthy, he continued. Now I just want to build a life that honors the people who stayed when I wasn't. She covered her mouth with one hand. I didn't buy a ring, he said quickly. I don't have a speech. I didn't call your brother first. He took her hands. I just know that if I wait for the perfect moment, I'll be waiting forever. Sienna's lip trembled. So I'm asking you right here, in our messy kitchen wearing a t-shirt you stole from me, will you stay? Will you choose this life with me for the rest of yours? She laughed through her tears. That wasn't a proposal. It wasn't? He smiled. No, it was a love letter wrapped in a ramble. Then what's your answer? She stepped closer and whispered, It's yes. Jackson let out a breath that felt like he'd been holding it for years. They kissed, and it wasn't wild or rushed. It was slow, sure, steady. A vow. 3 days later, they told Ethan over brunch. He blinked, fork paused midair. You're engaged? Verbally, Sienna said, holding up her bare hand. No diamonds yet. Ethan leaned back, mouth twisted. So we've gone from a don't date my sister rule to me planning your wedding? Jackson grinned. That's what happens when you're family. Ethan rolled his eyes and toasted with orange juice. At least I get to give a long, embarrassing speech. You better, Sienna said. Later that night, Jackson called his father. I didn't ask for your blessing, he said, but I want you to know, I've asked Sienna to marry me. Michael Reed was silent for a long beat. Then with a voice lighter than Jackson remembered, he said, I hope she says yes. She did. Well then, Michael replied, welcome to your next great legacy. Jackson looked across the room at the woman curled up in their shared space, his real legacy, and smiled. They didn't need the big engagement. They didn't need approval stamped in gold. They had honesty, they had scars, and they had each other. 1 year later, the ceiling never collapsed again. Not in the apartment, not in their relationship, not in the fragile places they had once called broken. Jackson Reed stood barefoot on the back patio of their new home, a modest yet elegant duplex tucked into a quiet street in Lekki Phase 1. The morning air smelled like citrus trees and sunlight. A soft breeze danced through the sheer white curtains drifting out of the open French doors. Inside, the kitchen hummed with domestic life. Sienna, his wife, was burning toast. Again. I swear this toaster hates me, she muttered, yanking it free just as Jackson stepped in and snatched the flaming edge away. He kissed her temple. And yet you insist on being the one who uses it every morning. Hope is a dangerous thing, she said with a grin. They moved like a rhythm now, him flipping eggs, her humming to an old Tiwa Savage song in the background. He stole her coffee. She smacked his shoulder. Their love didn't shout anymore. It whispered, steadily, securely. Their wedding had been small, 30 people, garden terrace, a string quartet playing Can't Help Falling in Love while Sienna walked barefoot down the aisle in a gown her best friend designed. Jackson cried, openly and without shame. Ethan had delivered a speech that made everyone laugh and cry in equal measure. I didn't lose a sister, he said, raising his glass. I gained another, slightly grumpier brother. A laughter. To Sienna, who rebuilt her life brick by brick. And to Jackson, who finally stopped running and chose to stay. They kept their last names. They didn't move into a mansion. They didn't throw post-wedding press parties. Instead, they planted a mango tree in their backyard and framed a photo of the two of them from the night of the proposal, messy kitchen, tangled hair, tear-stained cheeks. That was the moment that mattered. Not the glamour, the grace. Jackson taught architecture design workshops now, giving lectures at the University of Lagos and mentoring kids from underfunded schools. His work had been featured in 2 national design expos. His father, surprisingly, attended the last one. They didn't talk about the past much. They didn't need to. Sienna had gone full-time with her branding consultancy, turning side gigs into a full-fledged business. She worked from home most days, feet on the coffee table, glasses slipping down her nose, and Jackson falling in love with her all over again every single day. One night, Jackson looked over at her on the couch, feet curled under her, a book in her lap. Did you ever think, he asked, that your entire life would change because of a leaky bathroom ceiling? She looked up smiling. No, but I'm really glad it did. He slid beside her and pulled her into his arms. Because when the ceiling fell, it didn't break her. It led her home.